East End of London, in a council estate, the Golden Lane Estate, and then grew up in a police house in South London. So my background then shifted to Southeast London, where I grew up and was educated in a pretty awful comprehensive school in Eltham. But I could squirrel myself away in a corner and keep out of trouble in the design and technology department. And I guess that infected me with a fascination about design and materials. And so I found my corner and my interest there, and realizing that my interest was in the built environment. I designed a house for my A-level design and technology when I was 17 or so, but needed to make some money. There wasn't too much money at home, and so somebody who knew me quite well suggested property development. And I remember saying, I was at Swimming Gala, I remember saying, "What's that?" And he said, "Well, look, you're a bit of a control freak, Richard." He knew me since I was 11. And so architecture isn't for you, because you have to wait for a job. You're too impatient for that. Property development is the industry that starts things, takes risk, and if you do well, you'll be self-sufficient. And I thought, well, that sounds interesting. How do I get in? So I put my head down and managed to scrape the grades to get into Reading, which was considered then, I guess, as it is now, one of the preeminent courses, in the country, certainly, if not the world, for property development. So I felt surprised and privileged to just about get into Reading, and that was 1985 when I started, which was in the last century. So I admit I was out of my depth for the first 3, 4, 6 months, perhaps. My room was in Wells Hall. I remember it, with white brick walls, and I was a little lonely, but I found my corner. I continued my sort of passion for making places by covering the walls with bin liners and road signs and various other things, and got told off by the various people for doing that. But urban design was something that captured me quite early, and the more academic of the syllabus was a struggle, but I found my way and managed to graduate in 1988 with an acceptable 2-1. I was pleased with that, and enjoyed my time at Reading very much. I realised that when I left, and I got a job straight away as a land buyer, that the foundations that were given to me in learning land management and property at Reading were excellent. I mean, they really were a broad church of understanding of all the key things I wanted, but I needed to get out into the world and apply my entrepreneurial spirit and determination. So I was a land buyer for a house builder for 2 or 3 years, and I was always looking for ways of adding value. I guess my instinct and my spirit taught me that, and my education showed me a path. And so I was always coming up with new ideas, and that was useful, perhaps, because when I was just 23, the business that I was working for went into administration, and so I needed my lateral thinking at that point, and applied the same to a business model to develop student accommodation. And so together with 2 colleagues, we co-founded Mount Anvil, which is now, I think, one of the largest house builders in London still, but I'm no longer involved in that, as I'll explain to you. So we developed a model for student accommodation, developed a model for social housing. We started the company with just £2. We had very clever ways of working what was a niche market in 1991, and it's now very much, mainstream. Alternative still called, but certainly a mainstream part of the property industry. And Mount Anvil built over 5,000 student bedrooms. I put all of those deals together. We were the developer and contractor and sometimes funder, did all sorts of interesting things, and a couple of thousand homes. From there, I grew with my partners the business to over 80 staff, and but my passion still remained in making places. I guess I never really grew up I like making camps, and the camps just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And good camps are full of different seasonality of use, mixed in use. So I really wanted to do mixed in use development. I wanted to do things that were more challenging than just doing student accommodation and social housing. And so my partners allowed me, they were older and wiser than me, to set up two new companies. A Cathedral Healthcare that was way ahead of its time, developing primary healthcare, when the burden on secondary healthcare still is the same issue, I think, was so great. The government of the time in the late 80s wanted to build bigger doctors' surgeries, but didn't have the money, didn't have the expertise, and the PFI initiative was making it far too expensive. And so we came up with a different model, and Cathedral Healthcare built 14 doctors' surgeries with the model we created. I then sold that business in 2005, and I sold my shares in Mount Anvil in 2002, and concentrated on my real passion, really, mixed use regeneration that's socially inclusive, that's thoughtful, that's beautiful. And that company was called Cathedral. And so my formative decade, I guess, was building student accommodation, social housing, doctors' surgeries, a broad church of difficult things in the grimy areas of the UK. Cathedral was going to be the regeneration partner of choice. All 25% odd of brownfield land is owned by local authorities and public bodies. And they don't trust developers because they let them down often, and there isn't perhaps an alignment of purpose. I thought that there should be an alignment of purpose. Property development should be societal and should really answer some of the key issues that local government still have and had, and central government have, and towns and cities needing renewal needed a partner that was more societal than cookie cutter and just building some more units or building a shopping centre or building some industrial units. Stand back a bit and be thoughtful about repairing what is broken, and perhaps we would have sadly a niche in the property market, that we would have alignment with a societal purpose. And that was what drove the value system at Cathedral. And we went on to build some fascinating things. The first privately financed paid for fire station in the country. Instead of costing the fire brigade £7 million, was built for free, and they got a £3 million profit share from the development above in Canary Wharf. And that was our first project, again with Cathedral, just with £2 in the bank. We had some good ideas, we had the right attitude, and I'm pleased to say that we beat Berkeley Homes to that project, which was an enormous company. And Tony Pidgley phoned me up afterwards and asked why. Did you win that project? I wanted to win that project, and I smiled, and I knew the answer because he went in, and he's obviously a very impressive man, and asked said how many units he could get on the site and how much you pay for it. And I asked a different question. I asked all the fire officers there, what sort of fire station do you really want? And so treating the landowner and the town and the village and the city as a client, rather than just someone with a piece of land and what you can do with it, there's a different attitude. And that attitude grew Cathedral to a portfolio of around 2 billion. It was undercapitalized going into the financial crisis, but lowly geared. And that taught me a lot, and got rid of the rest of my dark hairs. And but I got quite serious then and grew the pipeline considerably, and realized I needed to get the right capital base, not the wrong sort of money that didn't have a purpose. An alignment of capital with our purpose was nirvana and very difficult to get. And so I found it by merging my company with Development Securities, which was a quoted company. And that was in 2014. So they had gross assets of about £500 million, didn't have regeneration expertise. So we brought the companies together, and a year later, I rebranded the business U&I with my board, all focused about the sort of connectivity of people, and it was based on the history of one of our projects. U&I then grew from 2 billion of regeneration projects to 12 billion, winning sort of famously some of the best regeneration projects in the country. Mayfield won a project which was the last large one that I won and shaped the vision for. It's around 3 million square feet. It'll have 35,000 people living, working, playing there, and a new public park for the city, the first public park in the city of Manchester for 100 years. So that's a privilege, and we built the park up front. And along the way, of course, we outgrew our balance sheet, as has been my history. And again, to get an alignment of the right capital and to get the business in the right shape, I stepped up to become the CEO, reorganized the company with a very impressive team at UNI. And Land Securities were seeking that sort of expertise in regeneration. We merged. Land Securities bought UNI for 190 million in December 2021 and put all of their regeneration projects into the UNI team, looked after the team, promised to look after the purpose of UNI, which was great for me. And in so doing, I effectively designed my own redundancy, which leaves me the opportunity to focus on another chapter in my career. And I guess reflecting on some things that I would like to change, or things I would like to influence with the benefit of that 35 years of experience, which I can summarize quite clearly. Whilst Reading is a brilliant course, and whilst my experience as a practitioner has been a privilege, really, there's one thing that's missing, and that everyone teaches the process of property development, but not the purpose of it. And the purpose of it is hugely inspirational. We have a climate crisis, we have a wealth inequality crisis, we have an economic crisis, we have a housing crisis. Those people in the built environment, in regeneration particularly, are some of the most important people on the planet. We can help resolve wealth inequality. We can help deal with the climate crisis. 40% of all CO2 emissions are in the built environment. We can help deal with flooding issues. We can help deal with societal issues. We can give hope and opportunity for all, and we can design some beautiful spaces along the way. So that's the purpose of regeneration, to make the world a better place. And I'm delighted to be back talking with Reading about how we can perhaps influence some of the young blood to pick up that torch and to take it forward. I feel deeply privileged to have benefited from a free education. And so you'll guess from that I'm not a fan of fees for higher education, but that's a sort of a separate point. I couldn't have countenanced at 18 going into university and leaving with tens of thousands of a loan, no matter how low cost that loan was. It was just not something that I could have faced at all. And I wouldn't have gone to university, and I had some grit and some learning and some ability to miss obstacles, I guess, from my early education. And so I took that into university, and that sort of diversity of population in university is essential for the industry. We need everyone represented in regeneration in the industry. If we're to produce great places, then the protagonists need to be from all walks of life. And so I feel very passionate that we should encourage those most disadvantaged, financially or otherwise, and least represented, because then we're going to have a balanced team, if you like, of delivering a positive impact through property. And so it's a very natural move for me to support bursaries with a very simple agenda for the Reading Real Estate Foundation, who select these students. I don't do that. The most disadvantaged, the least represented, and give them every support that we can. So I don't think it's a very generous donation. I don't know why more of my alumni aren't doing it. Frankly, it's a duty that we need to support the most disadvantaged, the least represented, so that we can deliver authentic places as an industry, which is key. And we can be increasingly diverse as an industry, which is also key. I'm quite keen to get, for want of a better word or a softer word, a regiment of foot soldiers who've got a purpose for thoughtful, inclusive regeneration. And how do I shape that regiment? What can I do to encourage it to happen? Clearly, some bursaries is useful, but also advocacy at a wider level. I'm pleased to be going back down the M4. I used to be driving my minivan when I was going to university, that quite slowly down the M4. I'll be going back down the M4 to lecture at Reading, and there's two elements of that lecture in pursuit of that regiment to try and inspire some people. One element is the purpose of regeneration, and teaching the purpose of it for social impact and how to go through that process to optimize social and economic impact. So what's the purpose of regeneration is one lecture, and how to do that with some passion. And then the second element to the lecture series will be, well, if you can't find a development company out there that has real purpose and passion, then set one up yourself. And the response, I can almost hear it now, I haven't got any money. Well, each of the companies that I talked about earlier were set up with £2, and lots of ideas, lots of spinning plates, getting up early, going to bed late. So how to set up a company with £2, and there are some key steps that you need to do, including looking for niches where you've got a bit of free space and you can compete with somebody like the might of Tony Pidgley without having his balance sheet. And so that might be fun and inspirational, I hope, for some of the students. Second part of advocacy is I've long been a supporter of heritage in regeneration and heritage-led regeneration. I'm in my second term as a Commissioner of Historic England, so I'm appointed by the Secretary of State. So I'm looking at wider policy issues and how one can liberate the benefit of heritage in regeneration, and I can use that role as an advocate there. And of course, I'm in danger of just looking and sounding like a grumpy old man in front of lots of younger people, talking about the past and what I've done in the past. So I need to be current. I need to keep that low currency, and I need to put my money where my mouth is, just to show the current strength of my argument in case studies. So I'm investing in social impact projects, from a social enterprise for artists to saving pubs. There's 50 of them closing a month. Saving churches, 15 of those closing a month, and optimizing the civic nature of those assets. So I've got some case studies where I'm investing in property projects, and that will support the advocacy role that I've got, both in talking at Reading and my role at Historic England. So all of those projects are focused. Their key objective is to optimize social and economic impact, and then to open source the financial appraisals, all the contracts and everything else from those case studies, so that we spread the word. We show that a project focused on social and economic impact can also drive some of the best risk-adjusted returns. And then you've got people's attention, because it's not entirely altruistic. The money comes, but it needs to start with passion. It needs to start with purpose. And I think maybe if I can gather some positive wins from all of that activity, I'm dreaming there'll be a regiment out there of 400 or 500 young people who are going to make the world a better place, with a bit of support from Reading, a bit of support from me, and hopefully a bit of support from other people who are going to fund some bursaries too.